From an agenda perspective, you really got 5 things. And the first 2 are the statutory thresholds and the regulatory thresholds. And you might say, what's the difference between the 2? So the statutory threshold discussion is right now the base CAS contract value of $2 million is coupled with the Truth in Negotiations or the Truthful Cost and Pricing Data, if you will, Act, which is also $2 million. So the first step is decoupling those 2 so that each individual, each act would have, CAS would have a different threshold at a minimum, and TINA would be there. There's also discussion, right, separately from the CAS discussion around increasing the threshold for TINA. We do have that inflationary adjustment, which hasn't been deleted from the FAR that goes into play October 1st of this year. But there's also talk of raising that rate even higher. From a CAS perspective, you go to number 2, and then you get the regulatory thresholds, right? That's their, what's a fully CAS-covered contract? Oh, it's a $50 million award, et cetera, et cetera. What we're hearing, and some of this also, I think Steve mentioned it earlier, the Section 809 panel that came out of the 2016 NDAA, they put a massive report into Congress as a follow-up to that. What we're hearing right now is the 50 million probably moving to 100 million. The elimination of the quote-unquote trigger contract value of 7.5, which kind of goes to the kind of bleeds into the statutory piece. And then I've heard 2 different numbers as it relates to the minimum value for a CAS-covered contract, currently at $2 million. So decouple those, and then there were some comments floating around from the House Oversight Committee that $10 million had been thrown out. If you go to the Section 809 panel, their recommendation was $25 million at the minimum level. So again, those aren't out. That's kind of what seems to be the word on the street, to go back to Sesame Street, if you will. And then you fall into the conformance to GAAP, right? So it's out there and they are this has been an ongoing as part of their meetings this year for 404 capitalization, 408 compensation for personal absences, 409 depreciation, and 411 for acquisition costs and materials. And then they are opening 3 new cases. One is on 407, standard costs for direct labor and direct materials. The other one is on 415, deferred compensation, and the other one is on 416 for insurance costs, to see if we still need those, in their mind, if we still need those specific standards, or, right, you've got deferred comp is covered in 312056, right? Insurance is covered in 205, 18, 19. And do we need that? Do we have that in FAR Part 31? It did not get overhauled. It did not get rewritten. It did not get cut out. So do we need that with also having GAAP requirements, certainly as a backup? Then you go to cost impacts, right? And the consideration of a FAR deviation to essentially deviate from 3603, as Steve was alluding to before, right? You've got some CAS statute stuff that sits over in 41 U.S.C. 1500, but it doesn't address what has been promulgated, if you will, in 30.6. So are they going to deviate from that? Obviously, many of you are probably familiar with the 2023 MRD that came out right after, I believe it was Raytheon that won on the case of excess costs, costs in the aggregate and not recovering excess costs in the aggregate. And there's scenario 2 of that memo that is not favorable to the contractor and arguably goes right against the decision of that case. So are we going to get changes there? I certainly hope so, because I got a bunch of CAS non-compliance and cost impacts I'm working on, and I'd love to get that out of the way. But we're also operating under an old FAR, so probably doesn't help, but it'll be too far. Last but not least, the applicability of CAS to indefinite delivery contracts, IDV, indefinite delivery vehicles, IDVs as they call them. What we're hearing, interestingly enough, so we actually, as Capital Edge, commented on this to the CAS Board in the open public comment, and we were of the opinion, it should be task order value, right? A 200 million IDIQ contract awarded to 5 companies is not a $200 million contract. It's a license to hunt, right? And go get individual task orders. So really take it to the task order level, hopefully with much higher thresholds than before, which still should exempt a lot of things, a lot of awards from this and stop getting, around, well, it was a $100 million contract, but I got $5 million, right? So it shouldn't be in play. And their statistics, and right, I don't, I always get joy out of reading DCA's audit report to Congress to see like how their numbers don't necessarily tie throughout the report, which I find interesting. But what the government has at least said in whatever study they conducted is that taking that threshold to a $25 million threshold would eliminate 70% of the CAS-covered contracts, but leave 93% of the costs of total CAS-covered contracts still in play from an applicability standpoint. So you're getting rid of a lot of, low-hanging fruit, if you will, in terms of administrative burden for a lot of contractors for smaller dollar contracts. You're not necessarily, it's not like you're saying, okay, $2 billion, billions and billions of dollars of costs are no longer going to be subject to CAS, because there's really big contracts out there, and that's going to stay. That's not going to work.